Okay, so I heard recording
Hey,
is in progress, yeah?
trendsetters, we're here with the infamous Mr. Claudius Phillips, and he's going to come on and talk to us about so many different things. One of the main things that I asked him to jump on and talk to us about is, in light of the new administration, what does that mean for the Black communities? What does this mean? This is not going to be the only conversation that we have with Mr. Phillips. He's such a wide variety of wealth and information. He'll be back, but this is where, it's a pinnacle point for us to address. And welcome, Mr. Phillips. Welcome to our program. How are you doing?
Thank you, Heidi. Yes. I'm glad that you introduced me like that. The last time I heard somebody call me doctor, it was about 3 months ago. You see, you have such a wealth of information. I could understand because of the fact that there's been what you call these narrow conversations. And the conversations they're not geared to what is happening really in the community. It's based upon what we call news bites and or clickbaits that you see in the news media and on social media, and has nothing to do with the reality of what's happening on the ground. Okay, so people get carried away by popular idiomatic expressions rather than understanding the demographics of the semantics on the ground. And semantics meaning there are things on the ground that are not being recorded by what we call popular media. See? And when I said to my friends in 2015, you see that guy, Donald Trump is going to win. Oh, I can remember the flack that I got when I was talking like that at Medgar Evers and that kind of stuff. I say, he is going to win. Okay? There's because of the fact that there's not just the feeling, but I understood the gravitas of the content of some of his arguments and how that resonated with men, how it resonated with the whites, and how it was resonating with Black people. While we were talking about his racism and all the misogyny and what have you, there's another thing that you have to pay attention to that is not really readily available in what we call the popular domain, okay? Because there's an element that works to choose the president, and that has nothing to do with popularity. It has to do with the mechanics of numerical science, as you're well aware of what played out this time around. Okay, so I must preface what I'm saying because of the fact that I will tell you, I am not a US citizen, but I know much more of the United States of America than the average American. Because when I started talking, he said, how you know that? It's based upon history, and it's based upon a large content of what we call prophetic things. 2007, there was a preacher who preached that Donald Trump would win an election if he ran, way back in 2007. He was not even a candidate of anything, except that the person knew a couple of things. It's like when I actually saw him come down the elevator, one day I was going up Jamaica Avenue in Queens, and I got up to the KFC at I think 65th Street thereabout. And I turned around and I saw, I'm a history buff, so I pay attention to anything that is historical. I saw this marker standing in the parking lot of McDonald's. And when I went over, it says that this is where the original office of, of course, Donald Trump's father's name, yes, was situated. And he has a son by the name of Donald. It struck me that Donald Trump, for years, had a historic marker with his name on it.
Wow.
And Queens Avenue, not Queens Avenue, Jamaica Avenue in Queens. Still there to this day. I took a picture and I posted it on my Facebook page, particularly on Lancaster Youth Forum. Lancaster Youth Forum had about 3,000 to 4,000 people because I wanted them to see. I said, this guy went to military college. Most of your presidents would have been trained at military colleges. They didn't just come out and they just put them there. George Bush was probably the dumbest of them, but he was a militarily college-trained person. They choose who they want there. And they do all in their power to make sure. There's something called Hegelian philosophy, which we're going to talk about, that is very much operative in what we call US-based elections, where we pit one person against the other, do some things in the media to make you feel that certain things are happening, condition the minds of the populace to let them feel that one thing is happening, when in the truth and in fact, something else is happening. Now, in fairness to, what's her name, our good vice president, Kamala Harris, she only had 110 days to sit down and to try to influence people. Trump had the whole 4 years of Biden competing.
Plus,
he was competing
consistent
for the whole of those 4 years. Remember, you had him for 4 years prior to that, and you had him competing for the last 4 years. Pay attention to what he did. He went a little of everywhere. So places that Kamala didn't go, he was there. And he understood how to play to the party of what we call that element that is privileged. Yes?
Yes.
And I go back again because of the fact that I had to, when I hear my people talk, I say, don't talk. Because I said to you, this next years of Trump is going to be the 4 best years for Black people. If you don't get up and get, you watch out. If you don't get up and get this time, forget it, stop talking. Because he would have to do a couple things to make sure that he pacifies, never mind all of these things that are happening with white supremacy and what have you. I tell them, you live in it. What is today's date? Today's date is Saturday. Who tell you that? That's the Greek told you that today is a day dedicated to this, the planet Saturn. It also has a number attached to it. It's the 16th of November. Those things are not you. Those things are white folks who put their name on it. They came from Greece. That's how those names came. So if you have to take into consideration all the things that we're talking about, who runs things here? It's them. Mm-hmm. Did you teach them? Yes, you did. And if you understand the fact that you taught them and they are just taking what they've learned, implementing the things that they have learned to manage you or to rule you, that is what is happening. I usually go back and say, you know, our people ruled this place that was called the earth, still called the earth, for 30 centuries. We did. We create some remarkable things and that kind of stuff that are still there. Okay, that they worship, that they are amazed about and what have you. It is just now their time. He's been put back in that place so that we could get it. We went too far left. We did. Wherever would you think definitely that is okay and the kind of stuff for them to be touting that we cheated you as though it's much more civil rights than your civil rights. They're using your civil rights to justify that. Okay, and it's a matter now of right, wrong, correct, and incorrect, because they are not the same. He has just been put there to help you to correct some of the anomalies that you have. People are going to have to fight for it. That is what it means. Okay, as much as we love Kamala, she's good looking, she's smart and what have you, there are places that she did not go. Trump went. And they love the fact that he's a white male, because you have to remember that the United States of America was founded as a country for white male. And that's in your foundational part of your constitution. They tried to give women what we call political suffrage by 1954. It was a populist idea. It is not even until they ratified the 17th or the 19th amendment that women had the right to vote.
Right.
It was not even the 13th Amendment when it was ratified in the country to say, let those people, the slaves, go free. We were not even included in the conversation as far as it relates to our right to vote until the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And you see what they're doing with it. They've already gutted parts of it already, because those things are things that they want to do to keep us as a people in our place. We have to understand what it is, and we have to stop pandering to the party or parties. We have to do things that are much more in-depth than we're doing now. It's not about talking. It's about putting a plural system in the kind of stuff, understanding the elements of which they built this thing, because they built it on our ideas. The Babylonians could not have done what they're doing or what they did, so as you come now to hear them talk about the Babylonian system, which it is in terms of finance, but they learned that from the Egyptians.
So let's talk about Project 2025. Give us a heads up. What is it? There's so many. We're at a standpoint where we're just waiting for the new administration to come in and things to shift.
Okay.
What are we expecting? What is the shift? What is this about?
So let's see if we could take the world-based axim first.
Okay.
Because the idea of 2025 is not a United States-based thing.
Okay.
It's a UN-based thing. It's a world-based thing that started way back in 2008 that actually was designed to do a couple of things by the year 2025. 2025 is a year that would, there's this up since way back when, in 1985. Okay, there is a design to change the world's system, and by next year it's going to shift. Okay, so what was done about 40 years ago, the Heritage Foundation and a couple of those far-right organizations decided to utilize the information that they heard and would have read from, because the UN was tracking the growth of the world population and were actually figuring that by 2034, the shift of power is going to take place because of the fact that by that time you'd have had 2 generations of people, a generation and a half of people coming into the world here, which in large measure are going to far outstrip anything that Europe could produce. Yes? So they came up with a couple of ideas and what have you. 3 of those texts I had. One was a text for elementary school. The other one was a text for high school, and the other one was a text for college. They laid it out as to how they would like the world to be assimilating their education in terms of what they wanted to do. And one of that, the cornerstone of that thing was that they would have certain things be done for elementary and preschool children. So a lot of the preschool that you see all over the world came out of that document. They wanted your children from very early. They wanted to indoctrinate them into the system of tolerance and what have you, and tralala, and they laid it out. I have the text. I don't have them here with me, but I had those texts because I wanted to know what was happening with the plans that we were going to see. They talked about finance, they talked about education, they talked about socialization, they talked about all of those things in those texts. Okay, so it was something that was laid out. Now, my white friends, on the other hand, decided that if this thing is going to happen on the other side, we need to preserve our ability to run things. So what the Heritage Foundation did was to take all the information that they saw, because this information was out there, and they decided to what you call a counter narrative to that thing. But they had to look for a candidate. The candidate was not the George Bushes. And here comes a guy who says, because they were asking him all along, would you run for the presidency of the United States one day? And he'd always say, well, I don't know, and that kind of stuff. Yes, he'd always, you ask him, Oprah asked him, Phil Donahue asked him, you name it, they ask him. Not now, years ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But he became the correct candidate. And what they did is that they rallied around him and put all their people around him because of the fact that he said the correct thing to assuage their fears. That's how he became president. And they plotted exactly how he's going to become president by doing numerous things that allowed people to put things on the ground, work them on the ground, and work them very well. They didn't take those things up after he lost the election. They didn't. They were there on the ground. Oh, yes, a lot more people went to jail under his administration than anybody else, but the systems were already on the ground. And you have to bear in mind that he did the CARES Act. He didn't want to do it. They forced him to do that with $1.4 trillion during COVID, which was money that was pumped into the economy to ensure the economy didn't stall, with 87% of that money ending up in white hands. That money you did not have to pay back. So it's $1.4 trillion, 87% of it, which remained with them. I actually got people to get their loans forgiven. Now, how are you beating that? Explain to me. So they have money, yes, that they don't have to repay, and you have a system that they put down that day in, day out, did the same thing. The largest platform in terms of cable news and that kind of stuff was something that constantly repudiated anything that you're going to say on the other side, and only did that echo chamber of stuff that these people wanted to hear that they're listening to. It's called programming. So if I program you enough with your affairs, but you have money in your hand, what are you going to do? You're going to keep your money. And you're going to want to keep your money. This is why when they say to you that he's done more for them, it's true. Because not only did he give the $1.4 trillion, 87% of which they got, everybody got a check with $1,200 with his signature on it. Counter that with the fact, definitely, that you also got $600 every week, yes, for unemployment. How are you thinking that? Multiply the effects of that.
We're going back to Project 2025. You spoke briefly about the elementary school, high schools, and colleges, which is something that we did here that are going to be affected by this Project 2025 package. But we're hearing it, and then it's kind of a miss, right? So what we hear in the community is that they're going to disabolish the Board of Education system. But what does that mean?
Okay.
What does that mean? You know, coming down the pipeline, as you said, on a broader spectrum, which is a worldview of education, which I can understand because we're kind of in not the greatest place when it comes to education.
Okay.
So what exactly does that mean?
All right. Remember the Brown versus Board of Ed, which was done in 1952. Right. So the Board of Education was not long. It was not something that was here for a long time. Woodrow Wilson and, of course, our good friend Theodore Roosevelt are the person who puffered that idea that they must have this thing that allowed the government to control what is taught in schools. Yes? And out of that came the Board of Ed and the Department of Education. Yes? So it was not something that is even part of your constitution. It was as a result of the need to have people educated, particularly after the last World War, that thing took its own life on. And the Brown versus the Board of Education was that decision where the thing that was struck down was what we call the separate but equal idea. Right, the segregation, right. Because that separate but equal idea came from way back in 1895, 1896 with that large thing about I could remember the act in just a while, not the act, but the decision, where a Black man challenged the structure of education and that kind of stuff, and he lost. And Brown versus the Board of Education was to say they're separate but
Is that
equal.
Carver? Was that Carver?
No, it wasn't Carver. It was during Carver's reign, but I remember the name of the decision. Okay, the Dred Scott thing occurred around the same time. Yes,
Okay.
and that led to the decision of this separate but equal idea, which allowed Black colleges to thrive. They did, with no money. Tuskegee Institute did very well because they prepared the Tuskegee Airmen during the Second World War that never lost a bomber. They were separate. They were not equal, but they did extremely well. Our good friend did pretty well with Bethune Cookman College in Florida and that kind of stuff. And he, of course, was actually battling with the Tuskegee idea with George Washington Carver at that point in time, because there was this pride in Black excellence in terms of education. There was no board of it at that point in time. There was none. It was just people who were able to utilize their ability to be able to do whatever. We lost as a result of Brown versus the Board of Ed. We lost because there was integration. Okay.
So what you're saying is by this demolishing.
Well, it's a diffusion. That's a better word.
Okay. By diffusing, the
Yes.
Board of Education would give communities by and large, the right to implement an educational system that will be proactive for their communities. What does that mean?
It should mean that. It
Right.
should mean that because of the fact that whether we liked it or not, this thing was going to occur because of the fact that the white population is just multiplying at 2.1 people per generation. The Black and Brown, that figure is now 3.5. So for every one person, there's 3.5 people Black and Brown that is coming in, that is multiplying. Remember, definitely, there are much more now in numbers on the Brown side than on the Black side. Yes? That projection, if you multiply that by the amount of people, which is about 45 million, that's over 100 and about 50 million new people by 2035 or 2034. That's the proliferation of, so when they're looking at that and they're seeing that we are diminishing, more white folks are dying now than they're being born. In order to maintain power, what do? You starve them for education because that's what they use to be able to get to the length of ascendancy that they do have now. Just look at all of your popular idiomatic expressions. Who drives it? It's not white folks, it's Black people. In terms of culture, Black people. In terms of education, Black people. You just name it. In terms of politics, they really did a job on us to let us understand definitely that you're not, by the way, all of the houses now, the Senate and the House and the presidency are occupied by the same party, yes?
Right.
In part supported by women, yes? And supported by Black men. Why? Because of the fact that they were dissatisfied by things that emasculated them and moved too far left and left them exposed. Even if it was for the thing. So let's come back to Project 2025. So all they did was to take what they know and they layered that to be able to say, we must be able to do these things, and to do these things well, we need to take out the Department of Education, let the states decide what they're going to do, because they know they have the majority of states. And if you're talking about numbers, they would have the numbers. So Project 2025 was predicated upon the fact that there was an international program to ensure that certain things happen financially, educationally, and otherwise by 2025. There was also a decade that was set aside by the UN for people of African descent. I don't know if you know that, but it was a big thing all over the world. 2015 to 2025, it is called a decade of people of African descent. A pope lost his place because of the fact that he went kissing the feet of black men. The last pope before this pope, Ratzinger, he did. He was forced to resign. You're giving them too much power. Don't do it. So what we have here is that we have an actual, how should I say, revelation of what that truth is. They're not prepared to give up power to you. Forget it, it's not happening. Barack Obama was an aberration. Again, he was allowed because of the fact that he had around him white men who allowed him to be able to direct what was to happen. That's what happened.
That's what happened.
Right. So again, we can't look at his election and say, well, we have reached. No, you haven't. Because in fact, there's nothing foundationally that you have changed. You have not. You can't change it. Are you prepared to go to war? To get us to where we're at, it took multiple wars to get us to where we're at. They killed their own to get here. They killed their own. What do you think 9/11 was all about? They tell you it was about some crazy people. No, it was not about crazy people. Then you're going to have to explain to me what happened with Building 7 on the evening of that day that fell down the same way without being touched by a plane. So, of course, we've got to understand the symptomatic things of how this thing occurs and the underlying thing that is beyond whatever you see. The political apparatus and that kind of stuff is manipulated to make sure that you see what it is. All those talking points, those guys knew definitely that Kamala could not win. There was no way of her winning. You just have to listen and look at how they're actually packaging the news. 2025 is inadvertent. It was part of a plan that was set out in large by the UN, Heritage Foundation and these guys just decided they're going to pattern what they're doing after this thing to make sure that we do not lose our pole position here as white folks. And if we have to dismantle the educative experience, we're going to dismantle it. Go back to what you think that you know. Unfortunately, that is not going to be so until they bring what you call Web3 into operation. They've already planned it. Web3, you're going to have to pay for. All this thing that we're doing here for free, it's not going to be free hiding. By 2027, it's not going to be free. You will have to pay for it. They've already set this thing up. Okay, and we've got to understand that we as a people have always tried best when we are denied. So we have to go back to some of the things that we know best and that kind of stuff. Some of the best educational institutions that we had were ours when we were not integrated. All of the big institutions here, we gave them their cachet. We did. Okay, so when we talk about W.E. Du Bois and Dr. Woodson and all those people and that kind of stuff, they came out of an experience definitely that shaped them. Woodson came out of an HBCU. Du Bois came out of what you call a PWI, predominantly white institution. He was put in that position. His parents, he did not know. And then they took him and made him the head of the NAACP. White people formed that organization. Okay, and we're going to understand definitely that the context of what you see is a largest plan that is going to have its ramifications because the fact that there's going to be large-scale pushback. You just have to look to see what is happening in Canada. Look to see what is happening in the United Kingdom. Look to see what is happening in France. Look to see what is happening in Germany. And you would get a fairly good idea of what the fare is here in the United States of America. It's not imagined, it's real. Okay?
So you brought up Web3.
Oh, yes. And a lot of our people don't even know that it exists. Okay, it was planned about 4 or 5 years ago that the majority of what we call corporate world is going to own how information is disseminated with this new thing. They want to get rid of Web 2, which is what we enjoy now.
Right.
Yes, right. To bring this thing into operation and that kind of stuff. And a large part of that was utilizing satellite-based technology to be able to educate and control people. Who best to do that than the man who has the most satellites in the sky right now? His name is Elon Musk. It is called Starlink. How convenient it is for him to have thrown all his weight behind Donald Trump in the last month and a half. What does that tell you? And by the way, you're going to have to pay him to use the Starlink because the Starlink could see you anywhere in the forest to 1.5 feet of wherever you are. That's how pervasive that thing is.
We saw this coming down the pipeline. You understand what I'm saying? With all the platforms now, you have to subscribe, you have to pay. So, you know, it's pick sense out of nonsense with this thing. You knew that this was coming down the pipeline. At what magnitude? Maybe we weren't as aware. So this is why I brought up Web3, because this is something that's you know, having a social media platform, this is something that they have been discussing on different platforms.
Yes.
Okay. So what we did get so far out of this conversation was that, yeah, they are going to dismantle, is the word that we're using, the Board of Education. That's a given, right? And maybe you're right that some of the finer institutions that we had in our communities back when we're talking about when the Board of Educational Systems first began were Black institutions, and they just copyrighted, you know, everything that we originally implemented. So that just goes to show what we are capable of in lieu of this, that we can build institutions of our own. And, you know, but that will take what we've been talking about for so long, Mr. Phillips. That will definitely take a shift in how we operate as a system, as a Black community.
That's right. This is why institutions like yours, because they were before, they had these institutions that were Black owned, that in some cases were up and down the East Coast, up and down the Midwest, doing educative things. Our good friend George Washington Carver was taken from Ohio and put there into Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Why? Because of the fact that he refused to go to a PWI. So you're going to have people like that who are going to come out and say, I need to do a couple of things. So I have come up with the idea, probably 5 years ago. I said, guys, we need to be financially independent of the system. We have to go back to some of the things that we know best. We have to go have land of our own, that we could grow our own food and supply our own institutions and that kind of stuff. We must have our own banks. We must have our own credit unions. We must, because we had them. We had our own insurance companies and that kind of stuff. We had them. Lincoln Bank and that kind of stuff, and Lincoln Insurance Companies and what have you. It's a Black experience. They're still around. And we have to go back to them. We cannot rely upon white people telling you definitely you do not qualify. That's not how we did business. We became comfortable to say that we were inculcated and that kind of stuff. We have 1.5 million of our children in PWIs. And if you look at
Mr. Phillips, this comes from the history of America, why people are scared to step out and be embracive of our communities, because every time history prevailed, every time we build, every time we grew, every time we manifested certain things, there was, as you said, the higher powers came and knocked it over.
it down. So we had several examples of that. Rosewood in Florida, Tulsa in Oklahoma, and we could go on and on about Seneca Village in New York and that kind of stuff. Even here, as we're speaking, we're in Crown Heights. There's the Weeksville Museum right next door. Which was the Weeksville Village. We are in a place that is called Crow's Hill. Black people used to be living here. Okay, they give this place its ethos and that kind of stuff. Right outside this library, next door, probably about just about 300 feet, is a big central half that is called the War Memorial.
Yes.
That was because of the fact that it's here that George Washington came to get his succoring so that he could go back and fight war in Pennsylvania. Here, he had to come. Here, he got his succoring from. Here had Black people. Are you understanding? So if we understand our history, nobody should run and get scared of the fact, definitely. Because if he didn't get suffering from here, how was he going to fight that war? How?
You know, the sad truth is that because of these repetitive history facts of how things played out, people are scared. We see it even with the quote unquote Black Lives Movement, where people, as soon as the police come, people start to scatter. They're not even standing. I was like, they're not even standing around. I remember I'm looking at, civil rights things, and I remember growing up and looking at the history of America where people were hosed down, dogs, hung, and families were torn apart. And like you said, there are people that started phenomenal, Black people that started phenomenal foundations, and they didn't even have an awareness of their parenting. So are we as a country, are we as a people, and you said it earlier, you got to go to war.
It is a matter of war.
Are we ready, Mr. Phillips, to roll up our sleeves, to get dirty, to go down in those trenches, to really do what it takes, and really, because our survival at this point is up for question. And this is where this is what this Project 2025 is for me. It's how are we going to survive? How are we as a people going to survive if we're still killing our kids in the street? If there's still this, that, and the other, if we're so caught up in distraction.
So I want to answer that question because of the fact that we have several cycles of our white brothers trying to usurp the authority of what he has learned and have failed. Yes? The period of slavery lasted for nearly 300 years, from 1619 to 1834, 1835. By 1865, we had the final reckoning of it and so on. Yes? But you had, after that, 100 years of what you call Jim Crow. It did not last. It lasted until 1965, let's say, yes? And out of that came this boom of everything that you saw, yes? However, because of the fact as a people, we have not done the deep thing en masse. And the deep thing en masse is where you took those institutions that would have suckered you and you dig deep to make sure that you go under the surface now to set up some of those additional foundational things that were necessary, that you taught them. They're using those societies and what have you, and all of the other institutions and that kind of stuff to make sure that they subvert your power. Just want to pay attention to what is happening here. Every one of your presidents, even including Obama, all of them are from your lodges. all of them, and your lodges and societies. All of them. So they speak with one voice, never mind the color of their skin. We, on the other hand, have looked at these things, the lodges, societies, and what have you, and we eschew their value. Let me ask one question. If you have to go to war, you're going to war with tanks? You don't have any. If you're going to war, you have the mechanisms to manufacture your own arms and ammunition. No, you don't. So it means definitely that if you don't have these things as part and parcel of your easy, accessible, how should I say, warehouse of armaments, then it means that you have to go into war spiritually. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking religion now. We're talking now that spiritual element of things in where you force things to move and they move. We have lost that ability. And anytime people hear people like me talk, they get afraid because of the fact that, Phillips, you're going to the other side. Yes, I am going to the other side. Because we are not fighting this war with armaments in our hand. They've stripped us of that. You could imagine that the Second Amendment is your right as a citizen, but if a policeman sees you with a gun as a Black person, he immediately becomes scared. And he's taught to eliminate that threat. How are you fighting against that? You have to operate in the element of the Black Panthers. There must be that element of spiritual surprise. If there's not that, forget it, it's not happening. And our institutions can't go talking the same crap that they're talking here and that kind of stuff. We have to teach deeper scientific things that allow us to be able to do what is required. This is what is going to be required after 2025. And by the way, even if Kamala had won, 2025 would have been implemented in the states because it's set up like that. Florida show you what they're going to do. Tennessee show you what they're going to do. Mississippi showed you what they're going to do. Ohio did show you what they're going to do. Texas showed you what they're going to do. You're sitting in a state that is the only state can secede by law. That's in their constitution. If they want to walk away from the state, they can walk away. That's in their that's why they call it a Lone Star State. That's
why they're the Lone Star State, yes.
But you know that your educational system was run from there. It was. Any textbook that is approved for any America, Texas have to say.
Yes.
That's the power that, and they understand that. Massachusetts has a couple things. New York talks about finance.
Right.
Texas talks about education. Wherever it starts, it finishes elsewhere. They started it. They were the first state to ban books in their school. Then Florida enacted it by law and followed. And we've got to understand how these states are set up and what drives them. Because of the fact that we don't have civics lesson in school here in the United States, we're dumb like the back of a spoon and we don't understand anything.
This is one of the things, I got together with a couple of colleagues, and I don't mean to cut you, but we are going to go back and start addressing American government and and having civic conversations, because there's no way that we as collaborative are out here asking and begging people to vote and do these certain things. There's to get involved. Okay. With our civic rights.
So I want us not to understand the value of the vote. This is why they are fearful of that vote, because of the fact that if we vote in large numbers, they're going to lose all the time. Yes? Just take, for example, Texas.
You said it, 3-1. We outnumber. You said it. You said it earlier today. What is it, 3.5 to 1?
Yes.
So you can imagine the numbers. You can only imagine
Heidi,
a crippling.
Heidi, remember, there is such a thing called a birthright citizenship. Yes? So all of those people who came in here within the last 2-3 years, if they had any children here, they are United States citizens. you can't do anything about them. Okay? So 2025 is saying we're gonna try to make sure definitely that we do things in such a way that when we send their parents out, because they tried, Donald Trump tried in his first term, and he was thwarted by the courts from mass deportation. It is not possible. It ain't possible because you have to come up against the church, you have to come up against the Constitution, and then you have to come up against the spectacle of the world. The church is going to get involved. Trust me.
No,
And if the church, we're talking about the Roman Catholic Church. We're not talking about the Adventists and whatever. We're not talking about that. Because remember definitely that the last set of people who came into the United States of the Americas en masse, so from the countries, Haiti, which is predominantly Roman Catholic, Venezuela, which is predominantly Roman Catholic, Guatemala, which is predominantly Roman Catholic, Panama, which is predominant. Are you understanding what I'm saying?
Oh, no, I definitely hear you. Even when Trump had said what he said about the Haitians eating cats and dogs, the church, the Roman Catholic Church said we were on the verge of closing, and they flourished and caused the survival of the church. And that's just a small town.
So
we're talking by and large.
That's right, Heidi. 32,000 people from each of these countries were coming into the United States per month.
We're in New York. We know what we know what we're seeing. We know what we saw.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Talking about deporting them, you may talk, but that's not going to be possible. It's not possible. If you did, you'd lose the momentum of your economy because those are the people in what you call the lower level jobs.
I was just about to start talking to you about that. They've enhanced the economy.
Listen, Florida tried that nonsense about 3 years ago. Remember what happened? The people stayed away for 2 days from the job, or not a treat, they stayed away a whole week, crashed the whole of the construction industry because of fear. Try doing it and see what happens. Well, I was just talking
But we saw this, Mr. Phillips, we saw this coming down the pipeline when they initiated that America was a dual language state and Spanish was the other language. So we're talking decades ago they saw that this.
And let's go back in your history, your civics lesson. Texas was what? Spanish. Nevada was what? Spanish. New Mexico was what? Spanish. Arizona was what? Spanish. California was what? Spanish.
Absolutely.
Before they were all annexed to the United States of America. It's falsehood that caused that war in Fort Hood and the Alamo to annex what we call now Texas, which is part of Mexico, to the United States of America. The same for New Mexico. It is called what? New Mexico.
Right.
It's part of Mexico. Okay, and once we understand the underpinnings of that and the kind of, they're just people whose families were here, who were just coming from south of the border, coming back home with their friends. And you need them. Okay, now the other part of the war, that culture war, is when things go too far left, they have a counterbalance on the right side to bring it back to the center. And that's what's happening. That is a war that would never cease because of the fact that if you're doing even chemical reactions and that kind of stuff, you know what happens. If you have to get the thing to be neutral, you put some of one and you put some of the other. Yes, so that you get something neutral. And that is what has to happen. See, we know that too far left is what happened over the last, let's say, 14 years. Okay, and everybody who's on the right, who has lost their pole position, because they have lost their pole position. You weren't thinking about them, okay? The NFL, who are the players in the NFL? The black. In the NBA, are Black. Who are your major, what you call cultural ambassadors in terms of music? They're Black. Thank God for Taylor Swift.
Let's go back to Project
Okay.
2025, all right? So we talked about the education, we know what that means. We talked about Web3, we got that down. What are some of the other things that, you know, a lot of people, you talked about home ownership, which is definitely and owning property and land. But if I don't know what's coming, you know, tomorrow, that little nest egg that I may, or even I may have, or even wanted to start, I'm going to withhold that as a Black community now, with not understanding or not knowing what Project 2025 has. What are some of your
so I want to read from it. Could I?
Yeah.
I have it here on my tablet. It's called the Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Let me just read the opening paragraph because of the fact that this is necessary. The foreword is by Kevin D. Roberts, a PhD, and edited by Paul Dans and Stephen Groves. Okay, and here's what it says. The project, the Presidential Transition Project, okay? A note on Project 2025. So let's go down and see what that says, okay? Because you have to understand what it says. It says here, could I read?
Yes, please.
This work, Mandate for Leadership 2025, the Conservative Promise, is a collective effort of hundreds of volunteers who banded together in the spirit of advancing positive change for America. Our work is by no means the comprehensive, again, let's go back. Our work is by no means a comprehensive compendium of conservative policies, nor is our group the exclusive cadre of conservative thinkers. The ideas expressed in this volume are not necessarily shared by all. Okay, what unites us is a drive to make our country better. Okay, first and foremost, we thank the chapter authors and contributors who gave so freely of their time and service to this country. We are particularly grateful to have the help of dedicated members of the Heritage Foundation Management and Policy Teams, Executive Vice President Derek Morgan, Chief of Staff Wesley Cooper-Smith, Associate Director of Project 2025 Spencer Christian, and Thomas E. Rowe Institute of Economic Policy Studies Director Paul Ray devoted a significant amount of their valuable time to reviewing and editing the lengthy manuscript and provided expert advice and insight. So if we're going back into history, whenever they tell you they put a manuscript up, it's much more than a constitution. Okay? The job of transforming the work of dozens of authors and hundreds of contributors is into a cohesive manuscript fell upon Heritage formidable team of editors led by Director of Research, editors Therese Pennyfather, Senior Editor William Poole, and what have you. Most importantly, we are grateful to the leadership, support, and donors of each of the project advisory board and what have you. Okay? So having said that, you understand that they produced a manuscript. And by definition, it is a script that was put together for mankind. It's like their Bible. So those guys are not going away from it. Okay? All right, so let's go down again and we're going to read from the first chapter. We want you, the 2025 Presidential Transition Project is the conservative movement's unified effort to be ready for the next conservative administration to govern at 12 noon, January 20, 2025.
Wow.
Welcome to the mission. By opening this book, you are now part of it. Indeed, one set of eyes reading these passages will be those of the 47th President of the United States, and we hope every other reader will join in making the incoming administration a success. This thing was written, you know how long ago?
That's what I was just about to ask you. What are the dates on this original?
2018. Planned. People had it in their hands. They told you.
Why is it? And you know, you gave me a headache. Why is it that we're always the last to know?
Because we don't read. And we don't like reading. Yesterday I had a reading exercise.
Oh my goodness, let's not even go there. And the way that we are structured in survival mode is not permissible. People are going nowhere.
Okay.
And they're staying repetitively.
Could I read part of this second chapter here? History teaches that a president's power to implement an agenda is at its apex during the administration's opening days. To execute requires a well-conceived, coordinated, unified plan and a trained and committed cadre of personnel to implement it. In recent election cycles, presidential candidates normally begin transition plan in the late spring of an election year, or even after the party's nomination was secured. That is too late. And I'm finished.
They saying right out the box, as soon as he swears in, this thing is going into effect.
Before he's sworn in.
Before he nominated.
This is written since 2018. Finished book. They told you what was going to happen, and people just banded that about. And we have Project 2025 and whatever. They say, listen, when you see, because of the fact that we're not taught to understand the use of terms, we feel that it was just a project. No, it was a manuscript, it's a roadmap for how they are going to do what is necessary.
Manuscript.
And we know how to do that very well and that kind of stuff. I go in and I get all the young people, all the women and children and that kind of stuff. Yes, hello. I give them some money. Yeah, hello. I have all the money. So I could dispense money. And I dispense money on them and that kind of stuff. And I kiss them up, love them up and that kind of stuff, make sure that their lives are better. This is what Trump did in 2019, 2020 with the CARES Act. They forced him to do that. He didn't want to do it. Said, you got to do it. Give our people money. And we make sure that you win again.
Right, because so many times we heard during this last candidacy that I'm voting for him with an expectation of another check.
Okay, so I just want to read the third paragraph because of the fact it's important. In the winter of 1980, the fledgling Heritage Foundation handed to President-elect Ronald Reagan the inaugural mandate for leadership. So this thing was around since 1980. This collective work by conservative thought leaders and former government hands, most of whom were not part of Heritage, set out policy prescriptions, agency by agency, for the incoming president. The book literally put the conservative movement and Reagan on the same page, and the revolution that followed might never have been save for the band of committed and volunteer activists. And by 1985, your president, 1981, he was president.
Right.
Hello?
Right.
So if you had this thing in 1990 and you saw that, what about that you're not paying attention to? Go back in history. Go back in history. We're not reading.
We're not reading.
We don't even have a counter to that. What do you have as a counter to that? Let me hear. You know of any document that we wrote as counter to this?
No.
None of our thinkers have gotten together and say, here is a narrative to counter this thing. What are you saying? Oh, well, the Constitution is going to protect it. No, it's not. Because they're saying here, we're going to go chapter by chapter, limb by limb, and we're going to take anything out that does not begin. They sat down, studied the Constitution, put things together to make sure they can subvert it. That's what they did with Roe versus Wade. Because it was not part of law. That's what they did with the Voting Rights Act and that kind of stuff. Hello? And if we don't understand, we're going to be doomed to repeat the same mistakes that we are talking about. There has to be a narrative, and you have to understand the depth of this narrative. These are people who knew since 2000, let's say 1985, 1980, 1990, 1981. As a matter of fact, Heritage Foundation was probably then just about 10 years old, because it came out of the debacle with our good president. I don't know if you remember him, President Nixon. Because President Nixon was the man who gave you some of the things that we enjoy today. He wasn't altogether a bad guy. No. He ensured that Black people could go to college. The DEI initiative was his idea. Clarence Thomas was the person that he picked and put in that position to say, get Black people into school. Those guys sat down then and said, hey, if this thing happened, we're going to have some problems. So let's come up with an idea to counter this initiative. He was a Republican president, for Christ's sake.
Right.
Yes?
Yes.
That when we look at this thing, putting Reagan together with these guys was the perfect recipe to have them win after our good friend Joel Ford messed up. Yes? We're doing the same thing now in New York. I want to bet you that come 2020, 2028, yes? Or 2026, let's say, because they're going to be midterms in 2026. If these people don't read this, they're going to take everything. It's a manuscript. Mm-hmm. They're telling you it is not going anywhere. Okay, so we have to understand the context of what we're talking about, and we must read this in order to counter the narrative of what it is.
So on a worldview,
several things are going to happen, and that is both prophecy. They have already started to show you that. There is going to be a coalescing around a certain powerful element of government, because again, you have a diminishing return of a certain set of people who the only way that they could rule again is to have a collective of these people around the world who think the similar way to what Project 25 has just espoused here. So you see it in England, you see it in France, you see it in Italy, you see it in Germany, you see it down there in New Zealand, you see it down there in Australia, you see it in Sweden. All that they've been doing is doing the same thing softly. And people who come from the African continent or the African countries or Afrocentric countries have got to understand what this is and put into place a system that is based on not only civility, but the spiritual elements of making sure that you have these things way down on the ground and embedded in people. And you have to do so with the kind of steel mind that requires us to be able to fight this war in the spiritual sense. You're not going to fight that war with no gun. I'm sorry, it's not done. Who manufactured the guns? You know any black manufacturer of guns? Kalashnikov rifle come from Soviet Union. A M16 carbine and what have you come from the United States of America? Yeah. Are you understanding what I'm saying? A Luger is a German gun and that kind of stuff. Where? How are you fighting them with weapons? Let me hear. How? So it cannot be that. And it has to be a deeper thing in terms of which you're gonna, and that nonsense where we're talking about African, get a life. They'd never allow that. You have to find those who are going to be sympathetic to your cause and emulsify the fact that you have to be mindful of how we got here. If it were not with our force and these guys fighting for your freedom in England, you would have never got freedom. But yet it's not happening. Okay, so you need to have them as your partners and that kind of stuff because you gave them life. There are a lot of them who know that they come from Africa. Jane Elliott and all the other girlfriend who was white and that kind of stuff. In her book, have more black text than anybody else that I've seen. So I asked her, how come you have such a big life? She said, I know I come from. I came from Africa. We just happen to be Caucasoid because of the fact that we went to the Caucasus Mountain and lost our pigmentation. And we interbreed, that's how we became what we became. But we learned all of our things from you. Everything that we learned from you. And that was the only white girl I heard talking like that.
Well, you know, the fact remains, and this is something that I teach kids all the while, that every implemental thing that you can put your eye on in this country can, the stop sign, even the line down the middle of the street, the heart surgeon, the spaceship, all these things was encompassed by Black people. So, you know, I mean.
Okay, let me just read from the last part of this paragraph. It says here, with this volume, we have gone back to the future. Hello?
That's an oxymoron, though.
You know what Trump was saying? Make America great again. And then some.
Turning back the clock 100 years. Turning back 100 years.
It is not 1980. In 2023, the game has changed. So I tell you that last year I told my group, I trained them, I said 2023 is a portal year. Guys, pay attention. Things are shifting. The long march of cultural Marxism through our institution has come to pass. The federal government is a behemoth weaponized against American citizens and conservative values, with freedom and liberty under siege as never before. The task at hand is to reverse this tide and restore our republic to its original moorings. It's too great for any one conservative politician to spearhead. It requires the collective action of our movement. With the quickening approach of January 2025, we have 2 years and 1 chance to get it right. And I rest my case. So I would be saving it and I'd be sending it to you so that you would have it as your Bible to read. It's the other Bible. You know, Trump has a Bible. Eh? Trump has a Holy Bible. That's the Trump Bible. It's a manuscript. It's a holy manuscript. This is the other one. Yes? So I would send it to you. Yes?
What does this mean for our people? Where do we start?
Well, we have to do what our people have always done, which is we coalesce around the spiritual thought that has very little to do with religion. And we have to do those things that are required educationally, socially, spiritually, and of course we have to shed, like I tell my friends, when November 1st came, I said, half of the things that I told you all that you did not do, if you're not doing them, you can't be my friend. Out. And we have to clean our house like that to be able to make sure that we have people who are going to be part and parcel of whatever we're doing, at a different level.
At a different level.
Heidi, you cannot be associated with children who don't understand the gravity of this thing. You have to drum it in their head. You all have to understand what this thing is all about. This thing is not about passive thing that you sit down here and do. No, this thing is serious things.
But you're talking about children. They got people who don't understand. They got people that's not even, you know, it is what it is. We can't continue to have this type of attitude. We can't. It's already too late.
Oh my God. And I'm glad that we're having this recorded so that we can begin to educate our people. I'm going to make sure that when we finish here, I send you the manuscript, yes? So that you take it, put it online, make sure that you have it ever so often. When you see things happening, before you see things happening, you can go and look at it and see definitely what they're planning to do. The justice system, they're going to affect, because he's already started doing that. They're going to affect the Department of Education because they're going to take it out. It's not going to be anymore. And by the way, don't even look to put it back because they're not putting it back. I'm just telling you. Pay attention. There are certain things Trump did that Biden did not go and undo. He did not.
Okay. So how is the school system going to be funded? How?
The states are going to have find creative ways of doing it because the states have. So states that have more money are going to do pretty well. States that did not have more money are going to do poorly. I'm just telling you. Okay? And they're going to find a way to make sure that they take the federal dollars and that kind of stuff and ingratiate those states that are putting their agenda to work. We're going to have to go set up our own heritage foundations. We're going to have to go ensure that we get foundational money that would allow us to grow our money. We're going to have to put our banks back in. We're going to have to put our federal institutions back in. Our institutions. We're going to have to be able to trade utilizing the new system of finance that brings money in to allow us to do what is necessary. Because they're going to weaponize the system. They tell you that.
Yeah.
They talk about it on one side in terms of Marxism. They're now saying we have to get back to our conservative moorings. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I'm glad that we're reading from Project 2025.
Absolutely. This is why I asked you to come on.
Yes. So we're not sitting down here.
I mean, we in listening to this, there's only one way for our survival. Again, I'll say it, you know, we have to unify. There's no way. It's just like you said, we have to rebuild, we have to grow, we have to invest
in ourselves. We have to find allies that are thinking like us and have a veritable interest in making sure that we survive as a people. We can't sing and dance no. We can't just go play ball, no.
All right. It's no time for marching.
While we're doing march, I beg your pardon. What are you talking about?
I mean, this is what we do. This is what we do. We get together and we go march, you know.
Martin Luther King had one. We're talking about Operation Breadbasket in 1967. So now we have to do the things that are necessary because we march. I've gone and seen everything and that kind of stuff. Yes? And he gave the speech about he's been to the mountaintop. And I've seen the promised land. And I may not get there with you. Next day he was dead. April 14, 1968. See, we got to understand that we cannot be looking for the paramount leader. This thing has to be something that we have to infuse on the ground and that kind of stuff in a certain way.
I agree with that.
Education institution we must be purposeful with it and that kind of stuff. The spiritual element, and that thing, I tell you, it has nothing to do with your religion. That nonsense that we are forced to think with I am Adventist, and you're Jehovah's Witness, and you're Pentecostal, and you're what they call you're Methodist, and whatever, have nothing to do with what we're talking about now.
No, it's systematic. I get it. I understand. It's a whole system of things.
If you don't get it now, you are not getting it again. Sorry, it's not happening.
It's a system of things.
So I said to my friends and I say, when you like Trump, I say, Trump is going to come and he's going to make sure definitely that we're forced to look at how we do what we do. It is second rodeo. And by the way, he tell you already, this is the last election that you're going to have. Hello. They're prepared to fight. They're prepared to go to war.
So we're talking about civil war.
Exactly. The only people who would stop that are people who are spiritually embedded in a certain way that could make sure definitely that whatever is happening here, you get what you have to get. And it has to be a movement like they would have done when they were doing the Underground Railroad. It has to be that, but it has to be large, it has to be vast, it has to be decisive, it has to be long-term. Yes? And we have to propagate what we have to propagate. It can't be that you like some, no, whatever you like have nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Okay? You have to understand the larger things that are involved and the deeper recesses of what we're talking about. It's deep stuff. They have a manuscript. They have 5 pillars in mind. Pillar 1, this volume puts in place a consensus view on how major federal institutions must be governed, and where disagreement exists, brackets out these differences for the next president to choose a path. That's pillar 1. Pillar 2 is a personal database that allows candidates to build their own professional profiles and or coalition members to review and voice their recommendations. These recommendations will then be collated and shared with the president's elect team, greatly streamlining the appointment process. That's pillar 2. Pillar 3 is the Prudential Administration Academy. So they have an academy, an online educational system taught by experts from our coalition. For the newcomer, this will explain how the government functions and how to function in government. For the experienced, we will host in-person seminars with advanced training and set the bar for what is expected of senior leadership. And pillar 4, the playbook. We are forming agency teams and drafting transition plans to move out upon this president's utterance of "so help me God." Once he says that, they are gone when he's swearing it. As Americans living at the approach of our nation's 250th birthday, we have been given much. As conservatives, we are much required to steward this precious heritage for the next generation. On behalf of our coalition partners, we thank you and invite you to come and join with us and project2025.org.
So they're dismantling the democracy.
Everything. It's going to be war. Everything. So this is now the third, what we call civil disobedience en masse that they're planning. Everything that they could go up against to subvert the Constitution, they would.
So everything that we see and we know today,
it's going to be war.
The thing of a past. Everything that we see today. So for us to be consistent on the path that we're at.
Here's what has to happen. You see this little thing that we're doing here? This has to catch around like fire. You have to take this particular thing that we're doing here, put it up on Facebook, put it up on Instagram, put it up, put it up, so that people can hear what we are talking about. Send it to me so that I could take it and that kind of stuff and put it on TikTok and put it there so that people can hear. This is not me saying so. It is written. Our people are not reading. And because of the fact that we don't read anything, we listen to somebody who said that he's an expert about what? Yesterday, I had a practical example of explaining to people the difference between a 501c3 and a 501c6. Somebody said, oh, well, we need to make it good because of the fact that they've fooled our people into feeling that the 501c3 is in their interest. No, it's not. It is set up for charitable purposes. Right. That's the designation. A 501c6 is a nonprofit, but for business leagues, chambers of commerce, and entities of that nature. It's for money, it's for money, for business. I'll read it tonight. Because I'm not going around here telling you what I don't know. I'm telling you what I know, what is written. Let them take it back. They have already written it. They're not taking it back. That's why they wrote it, and they published it. So something new. This is wrong since Ronald Reagan. After Nixon, they got together. They did the battle of Nixon because Nixon actually had both houses. Same as Donald Trump.
You know, Mr. Phillip, as I said, you know, this was a good place to start. This was a good conversation, you know. If we don't learn it by now, if we didn't get it through this, I don't know what it'll take. You know, you done through smoke flares, you done put everything out, you got flags going, you got whistles blowing, you got everything. You read directly.
I know it's not a march. You could march as much as you think and the concept.
While we're doing that, what we gonna do? We go march? We go march?
While we're doing that, we have to do the other thing. Our good friend who died in April 14, 1960, told you what it was. He said, I've been to the mountaintop. I've peered over, I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but this is what you have to do. He laid it out. We didn't. We paid attention to the disco area and all that. We had fun and that kind of stuff, smoke some weed and what have you, had a good time, play some sports and
so that's what it is. That's what it is. It's
lit the world of fire in terms of music.
We had fun. All these decades, we had fun. Now it's time to put some work in. Now it's time to go to war for our people. Now it's time for us to come together, unite, and get this done. There's no other way. We can't do it any other way. We're not going to survive any other way. And it is what it is.
But I'm glad that we have some young people who are prepared now to go to learn, to chart what you call a new course and that kind of stuff.
More importantly, Mr. Phillip, not only are they willing to learn, but they are so next generation. You understand? So they take what they learn and the implementation is phenomenal. It's really dynamic. We really have to embrace the next generation because we can't do it alone. It's like you said earlier, they have some people that come from knowledge, and it's not knowledge alone, it's knowledge and experience, and that collaboration of the two is really going to help us to move forward with what we need to even start thinking and to even start having conversations. And we do need to open up more broader streams where we can have these type of conversations.
Okay. Well, I was glad that you had me on, Heidi. You know, it's now 1:02. We had this room here until 1 o'clock, but yes. I'm glad definitely I was able to share, and not only share, but to share edifyingly, because a lot of times when we're talking based on opinions. This is not opinion. This is part fact. It is also part prophecy. The United States is going to begin to close its doors. It has begun. I'm telling you, Trump is going to slam Okay, it's going to be a process, it's going to be a fight, because there are people who are going to fight back, like hell in the courts and what have you, to make sure that it's not done. But we recognize that it's going to get totalitarian. Trump
Yeah.
is just a playbook of what the next leader who's going to come is going to be. Okay, this whole thing is going to become proliferated and the kind of stuff. China is going to begin to do what it does in the terms of its ability to do certain things. Why? Because it's the largest country with the largest indigenous population anywhere in the world. It has the largest immigrant population. They don't buy rice unless it's from China. They're not even buying fish unless it's from China. You understand what I'm saying? Wherever they are. Okay, not only that, they have robots that are far superior to robots here in the United States.
That's our next conversation. We're not gonna, that's why I'm asking.
Okay.
The worldview.
You know what we have to do? Yes? Next conversation. That's the conversation. What is happening in this world that we do not seem to be paying attention? It's
Absolutely.
really to imagine. Okay,
Yes.
so Heidi, I was glad definitely that we did this exercise.
Thank you again, Mr.
I hope that did not
You're always
disappoint you.
welcome.
Yes. And be blessed.
Be blessed, Mr. Phillips. Thank you so much.
Share on Instagram.
Nah, we're gonna share
on
it. We're
LinkedIn.
gonna share it. We're gonna
Share
share it.
on
We're gonna break it
TikTok.
down. We're gonna break it
Share
down.
on Facebook.
We got it. We got it. We're gonna break it down. We're gonna, you're gonna see little nitbits everywhere. And
That's right.
I'm gonna
And
send it
because
to you.
it's recorded, AI would have prepared a transcript for you. Once you say done, that transcript is done. Yes? Okay. So I bless you again. May the fortunes of good go with you. And if you can't be good, be prayerful.
Likewise, likewise.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, bye-bye.